It's my honor to introduce the CEO of the 1792 Exchange and the 51st Attorney General of Kentucky, the first black American elected to a standalone office in Kentucky history, friend for close to 10 years, the 51st Attorney General of Kentucky, my friend Daniel Cameron.
Well, thank you, Mac, for that kind introduction. Can I just say, it is good to be in a room full of folks that are not afraid to proclaim the name of Jesus Christ. I know they'll be here later, but to Governor Kemp and the First Lady, Lieutenant Governor Jones, General Carr, who was here earlier, Dr. Reed, so many other distinguished guests, it is an honor to be here in the Peach State. And let me just say, I bring greetings from Kentucky and that other fried chicken restaurant. I will say it is nice to be in a state that enjoys chicken as much as we do in Kentucky. Look, I ran for governor in 2023 and unfortunately lost that race. But what I will tell you is that I always envisioned giving a speech to a room full of legislators. I just didn't know it was going to be 400 miles south of my own state capital. But as Dr. Reed can attest to, the Lord does work in mysterious ways. And I'm grateful to be here with you and the Faith and Freedom Coalition for this opportunity to participate in this luncheon. This year marks the midway point of the decade. It can be argued that the first half of the decade was defined by the grievances of the radical left. Grievances that found fault with capitalism, that found fault with our values, and found fault with our founding. These grievances serve no purpose except to elevate identity and division over merit and unity and foster a spirit of national decline. The result's bleak. Our institutions not trusted, our corporations co-opted, and our culture corrupted. But this year comes joy in the morning. This year in 2025, we are entering a new chapter in the American experience. A chapter that promises hope, restores common sense, and renews our commitment to the American dream. I want to say that against that backdrop, President Trump and his administration begin their work in Washington. A new legislative session is on its way here in Atlanta, and across this country there are legislative sessions that are going on. And what happens here and in state houses across this country and in the White House will very much determine our future. In his 1979 State of the Union address, then President Jimmy Carter proclaimed that for this nation to be successful, we must change our attitudes as well as our policies. And even though his policies differed from, I imagine, most of ours in this room, the sentiment expressed by President Carter is still true. Policy follows attitude. It was Lincoln who persuaded a nation to alter its attitude on slavery, thus making for the ratification of the 13th Amendment. It was Theodore Roosevelt who, by sheer force of personality, defeated the corporate monopolies and taught us that America's financial health and well-being couldn't be held in the hands of a few at the expense of the many. It was Ronald Reagan who ended the era of big government by convincing the American people that if we made sure that the distant elite in Washington, D.C. would get out of the way, that we could handle our own lives. And in the years to come, it might be said that by reopening Georgia, your governor, Brian Kemp, altered the mood of millions of Americans, and strengthened the resolve of a nation. In this last election, the American people demonstrated an overwhelming change in attitude. It occurred in just 4 short years. An attitude that was resigned to complacency, to one awakened by the realities of bad fiscal policy, inflation, and insecurity at our southern border. An attitude that did accept the premise that the federal government could be all things to all people, but now realizes that the role of government is limited and should provide for our security above all. An attitude that went from making Georgia a purple state to putting Donald J. Trump back in the White House. The attitude of the American people has changed, and now the policies must follow. Now, the White House is off to a good start, abolishing DEI policies and practices within the federal government, taking decisive action to secure our southern border, promoting a culture of life, and without any shame, saying that there are only 2 genders and only women should play in women's sports, not men. In 1932, Justice Brandeis talked about the importance of states having courage to be laboratories for democracy. I'm here to tell you that this great state of Georgia has shown its courage. Your legislators have shown their courage. It's my hope that you will continue to do so. When tragedy struck and Laken Riley's life was taken, you didn't wait on the federal government. You passed House Bill 1105 to keep your streets safe from criminal illegals. And it's fitting that yesterday, as Mac talked about, the first bill that President Trump signed into law was the Laken Riley Act. And when you faced boycotts over common sense legislation to secure your elections, you stood your ground. Even after false media narratives made the MLB pull out their All-Star game, you didn't back down. And as a result, you can proudly say that Georgia has some of the strongest election laws on the books. And when federal inflationary policies were making it hard for hardworking people to get by, you guys made some changes. You cut income taxes, you suspended the gas tax, and provided homeowner tax grants, and in some, the Peach Day committed to saving Georgians some $7.6 billion. That is what's in this room, that is what you've done, and that is what you've accomplished. And I got to tell you, this morning, a bold and courageous governor and bold and courageous legislators are choosing to take the road less traveled and work hard to make sure you bring tort reform to Georgia. Now, the governor and your legislature knows this is not going to be an easy task. But you're committed to it. Because on a whole host of challenges in the past, you've proven your mettle. And this will be another one of those times. And I want to be one more voice from Kentucky that is rooting you on, that is encouraging you. Because we've seen what your state has done, and you all, amongst others, can help lead the nation. Now, in my current role as CEO of 1792 Exchange, I want to make sure that we roll back DEI policies, make sure that businesses are focused on business, and that ultimately we restore the promise of America. So in any way that I can help, I want to do that. Our states are the laboratories for democracy, and you all can help lead in that effort. Before I close, I want to end on one poignant note. I'm sure all of us in this room, as has already been recounted by other speakers, watched on our screens last night as the tragic events unfolded 400 feet above our nation's capital. Like you, my wife and I are praying for all those involved. As with Laken, the tragedy of this magnitude puts things in perspective. On this side of heaven, as David talked about earlier, we will never fully understand why this was allowed to happen. But as human nature goes, it refocuses us and reorients us on what our priorities are. I hope this morning you hugged your kids a little tighter. I hope as members of the legislature you understand the urgency with which you have to do your work. Micah 6:8 calls us to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. My prayer is that those that were on that plane are walking with God now. My prayer is that the legislators that are in this room will walk into that Capitol with God. And that those that are in this room will help us restore this country and turn us back to God. That is what all of us can do here today. May God bless you, and God bless the great state of Georgia. Thank you so much.